Hello everyone, all students, grade 10. I hope this video find all students well. Welcome to today's video where we are going to be considering adaptive features. First of all, we begin this. I want to talk today a new part for the adaptive features. Before I remember you the small parts for the two types from the plants, xerophytes and also hydrophytes. Xerophytes plants live in the places where water is short. I give one example, I explain one example for this part, such as the desert plants, such as cacti. Let's check the figure below. About the cacti, this came from the plant, from the xerophytes that live inside the desert, that can say have short water, but in the opposite direction, hydrophytes. Hydrophytes plants live in wet places. Wet places is very important point. You must compare between two parts, hydrophytes and also xerophytes. Between the environment, this dry condition and also this wet places. And check the pictures below, the figure below, that illustrate the two kinds from the plant. Xerophytes is example for number one, xerophytes, cacti, and also hydrophytes, the second plant that found in the wet places that don't have any problem with the water, but in the opposite directions, xerophytes have more problems because the plant live in the short water, live in dry conditions such as desert. Let's move on another part for the characteristics for xerophytes. I remember you all these characteristics to remember and start with me from a new part. So these features for xerophytes. Xerophytes have more features. Crossing stomata, cuticle, hairy leaves, stomata on underside of leaves, and the cutting down on the surface area. So I explain the first part, the first point, crossing stomata. The plant close stomata, then transpiration slow right down. That means slow right down, the plant stop, lose more water vapor. The same, these pictures below. These pictures below illustrate the one process, more process inside the plant, such as closing stomata. And I give you example and explain the example for this point in the last period. Closing stomata, that means the plant keep more water. Cuticle, the plant have one kind from wax substances. Wax substances is very important substance for the desert plants that make the plant waterproof. You can say another way, make the leaves waterproof. And also let's move on another part for the hairy leaves, that you can say trap layer of moist air next to the leaf. You can say moist air around the leaves. All this you can say leaf or leaf, the same point. And also found another structure for the xerophytes, stomata on the underside. You can say the plant have a few number of stomata. Stomata, that mean you can say a little amount from water vapor that start to evaporate from the plant. So the plant keep more water. Start to another part for cutting down. A small surface area for the plant, such as a smaller surface area on the leaf. The less water will evaporate. I give you example and explain. You must check this figure for spines. Spines instead of leaves. The plant need this point, need this characteristic to survive themselves, from loss more water. And you can say stop transpiration from the plant and make a smaller surface and start, you can say, cutting down the water vapor, or cutting down the large surface and stop loss more water. This about the loss more water vapor from the plant, and all these points I explained in the last part. But today I start with you a new part for hydrophytes, that the kind of the plants that live in the wet places and including those that live in the water. So I give you 1 point from this characteristic for the hydrophytes. Hydrophytes live in wet places and futures don't have any problem with water shortage because it lives inside the water. Example, hyacinth. Hyacinth is very important plant that have more characteristic and also that live inside the water. You can say on the water, in the surface of water. Let's move on another part to check these figures for the hydrophytes. Hyacinth, this kind from the plant that live in the wet places, and you can say another way that live on surface of water. So this morphic and understand these features for this plant to survive themselves, to survive the plant, and that adapt to live inside the water. Number 1, the root of the plant don't attach with the bed of river. You can say don't have any root system that attach with the soil underground the water. You can say the soil of rivers don't have any root system for these plants. Because the plant is, you can say, still float on the outside of the water. So the root system don't attach with the soil inside the water. And also stem and leaf. You must understand this point and focus with me. Check this figure below about this plant, hyacinth, that have more air spaces inside leaves and stem. You must understand the structure of the plant, such as leaves, first point, and number 2, leaf stalk. Leaf stalk is the small part between leaf and also stem. So air spaces, more air spaces between these parts, and also inside the leaves, more air spaces, and also inside, you can say in the leaf stalk, more air spaces that have more characteristics and that help a plant to float. You can say still float in the water because of filled with air to float in the water. This is the first point. About features for the plant hydrophytes. And this example, hyacinth. Hyacinth, you must check this figure in the opposite directions about stomata. So I give you this part and explain this point for stomata before. You must understand this point that leaf and also the stem, leaf stalk, have more air spaces between these points inside the structure of the plant that keep still, you can say still plant float freely on the water. You can say, understand under this, you can have more questions for this point in the exam. You must understand, you must discuss the air spaces that found inside the plant. The air spaces inside the plant have, you can say, filled with air to float in the water. This point about features, two characteristics for this plant. Let's move on another part. The plant have more stomata. You can say upper and down, you can say lower and down side of the leaves, because the plant need carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is very important gases for make photosynthesis inside the plant. This process the plant need it, in which the plant need it to make food such as sugars or glucose. All these points for the hydrophytes. And let's check this figure and this slides under microscopes that illustrate and have more stomata. And stomata that is very important structure in hydrophytes. The plant need it, the structure in which the plant need it to make food by photosynthesis and also absorb carbon dioxide. This are the structures, and also air spaces that filled by air that keep the plant float on the water surface. This about this last part for chapter 2. Start with you another part for chapter 3, organisms and their environment. Organisms and their environment, you can say another name, ecology. Ecology is one very important way of studying that living things and non-living things and all things in the same, you can say that one place on one environment, that including more substances, including non-living things and also living things, plants, animals, all this. But that means another way, plants and animals affected by their environment and also the environment affected by them. So found interacting between living things and also living things. That you can say the way, the field for the ecology. Start to move another part, population and ecosystem. You can say ecology that have more systems. Population that, before I explain this point, that a group of organisms of one species living in the same area, the same places. You can say the same time, same places, all these organisms that found, you can say populations. Living things and also non-living things. You can say ecosystem include all things, such as living things and non-living things in one place and found interacting together between them, such as river, such as pond, all this example for examples for population and also ecosystem. Ecosystem, you can say unit, community that have two kinds from living things and non-living things at the same place at the same time, called community. And populations have different species in an ecosystem. Let's move on another part and check. You can say examine this pond that have different populations such as birds, plants, animals, and also another organisms inside plants. And also another organisms inside this place. So different population for this point, you understand population and ecosystem. This is example for ecosystem. And have, you can say that have more differences, have more different population from plants and animals. Let's move on another part and another figure that illustrate ecosystem, different species, different population from plants and animals, and include that all these organisms at in the same time in the same places to produce community. Community is very important point. Is example such as river, such as pond, that is example for ecosystem. Let's move on another part about energy flow. Before I explained the ecology, ecology that one from science, can say one branch from science subject that study the kinds of living things and non-living things and interact between together, and but found one point between interacting between living things and non-living things, that you can say energy that produced inside the plants by photosynthesis, the process in which the plant need it to make foods inside the plants, and that produce energy and convert light energy to chemical energy. So chemical energy that found inside the plant. The plant is major source for this chemical energy that produced by light energy. So have two kinds from the forms that illustrate the kinds of energy that found inside the plants and animals, such as food chain and also food web. That two forms that illustrate the direction of energy from organism to another, from plant to animals, all these forms. I illustrate this example for energy evaporation, energy transferred from organism to another, and check these points. Number one, sun. You can see light energy that travel to the plant are straight, and the plant used the light energy to produce chemical energy and produce the food such as glucose, such as sugars, or this food of the plant. And the energy start to transfer from this plant to the animal, and start to transfer from this animal to the another. So you can say this form illustrate the transfer. You can say the differences between animals and plants, and differences between amount of energy between all organisms. All these forms, the next period I'll start with you to explain all these points, but I'll leave you now with a small video that illustrate small points, small structures for hydrophytes, such as hyacinth, that found inside the wet places, and also that have more information about ecosystem. You can say ecology, branch from the biology subject, that special field to study the living things and non-living things inside the environment.
Thank you, Jack. That was fun. Be sure and watch this video to the end to learn how you too could be featured on one of our videos. Well, as we mentioned earlier, in this video we are going to learn about ecosystems, and we're going to have a ton of fun because ecosystems are super cool. So, what is an ecosystem? Well, an ecosystem is an environment where living and non-living things interact. An ecosystem is an outdoor environment. Now, we just said that in an ecosystem, living and non-living things interact with each other. You might be wondering, what are some examples of living and non-living things that interact in an ecosystem? Well, living things like animals and plants interact with the non-living things outside, like the weather and soil. Together, they make up a very special place called an ecosystem. Here's the thing about ecosystems. They can be small, medium, or large. It all depends. Just as long as it's an environment where living and non-living things interact with each other. For example, this puddle is an ecosystem. Yeah, it's just a small puddle, but it's an environment where living and non-living things interact with each other. This little puddle is an ecosystem. It's a very small ecosystem, but it's an ecosystem. Here is a larger ecosystem. It's a rainforest biome. It's a much larger ecosystem than the puddle, isn't it? There are many different living and non-living things that interact in this environment. It is an ecosystem. Larger still is the whole Earth. Scientists consider the Earth to be one large ecosystem. So an ecosystem could be as small as a puddle, or as large as a biome, or even as large as the whole Earth. To make things as simple as possible, we're going to focus on the ecosystems found at the biome level. So it's larger than a puddle, but not as big as the whole Earth. That way we'll learn how ecosystems work and how living and non-living things interact with each other. Alright, you know what time it is. Let's learn some ecosystems. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Hey, Charlie, good job, by the way. Good job. The first ecosystem we are looking at today is the desert ecosystem. The desert ecosystem is found in the desert biome. ecosystem in the desert biome receives very little rain. The desert biome is incredibly dry. That makes the desert ecosystem unique. The animals and plants in the desert have adapted to survive without standing water or much rain. Some animals actually keep water in their bodies to survive. Other animals get water from the food that they eat. A plant people think of when they think of deserts is the cactus plant. A cactus has spines that protect it from being eaten by creatures and has a special covering to protect the water that is inside of it so the water doesn't get out. That is the desert ecosystem, a very dry ecosystem. The soil is dry and there just is not much water because there isn't a lot of rain, and the plants and the animals have had to adapt. The next ecosystem we are going to learn is the
This only for today around the ecosystem, desert ecosystem that include animals and plants and that have short water, and you can say all these organisms adapt with the environment with the short water. This for today around xerophytes, and this video include one characteristics for cactus, the kind of the plant that found inside the desert and that have more characteristics, and I explained all these features before. But I give you one homework, compare between hydrophytes and xerophytes, and you must start to make a small drawing for these characteristics to understand this point, and also make table, and you can say write all these points inside this table and make comparison, for example, and for features, stomach and root system and larger surface and all these points, and start to make comparison between them. At the end of section, thanks so much. See you soon.